The Pontchartrain Park Pioneers Oral History Project is presented by the Center for African and African American Studies at Southern University at New Orleans and the following sponsors. The National Park Service, the United States Department of the Interior through the Louisiana Department of Culture, Recreation, and Tourism, the Louisiana Office of Cultural Development, and the Division of Historic Preservation. Greetings, and welcome to the final module of this semester. Again, I'm Dr. Clyde Robertson, your professor. Today we'll be talking about the Pontchartrain Park Pioneers, an oral history of New Orleans' civil rights era segregated black suburb in the city. This project utilizes oral histories of New Orleans African Americans who achieved the American dream of home ownership in Pontchartrain Park. Pontchartrain Park is the second oldest African American community in the city of New Orleans. Denied by redlining from buying homes in the rest of the city, middle-class African Americans were able to form their own community in what became known as Pontchartrain Park. While legalized racial housing discrimination was rampant, segregated black suburbs in the city arose all over the country. Collier Heights, for an example, in Atlanta, was developed exclusively for affluent African Americans through an African American initiative. In 2009, the National Register of Historic Places recognized that neighborhood as the first neighborhood developed, financed, designed, and constructed by African Americans for African Americans. Between 1955 and 1961, New Orleans replicated that which was being done in Atlanta and developed Pontchartrain Park around a 200-acre green space consisting of a golf course and a park which was reclaimed from low-lying swamps surrounding Lake Pontchartrain. It was built under Mayor Delachap's Chep Morrison's administration during a period when desegregation was becoming a social and political force. Pontchartrain Park was developed over the objections of the NAACP and other local groups. Pontchartrain Park gave something unknown at the time to New Orleans' African American middle and upper class residents, like Collier Heights. It was just for them. More than a decade before the Civil Rights Act, it offered 2 or 3 bedroom ranch-style houses with ample entertaining spaces and open floor plans. There was a school, a church, golf course, a tennis course, and, of course, the park. For the new residents, it seemed like the American dream was certainly in reach. The neighborhood was settled in part by veterans who could afford housing on the GI Bill, but couldn't obtain home loans because of redlining. Pontchartrain Park was marketed to a professional African American public. Despite their income, they had been subjected to inferior housing all of their lives. Pontchartrain Park welcomed them. Residents formed strong communal bonds, shielding them from the injustice they had endured all of their lives. Southern University at New Orleans, our beloved SUNO, a historically black college, opened in Pontchartrain Park's northwest corner in 1959. Black students could not attend the nearby all-white LSUNO, which is now UNO, or LSU in Baton Rouge. Tuition at black private schools, such as Dillard and Xavier universities, were often unaffordable. SUNO gave these young people a chance for an education, and that mission continues. This project is closely tied to SUNO's cultural identity. The community and the university have been interrelated for the last over 60 years. The oral histories of the local original settlers reflect what was happening to African Americans nationally, even as the country moved painfully toward integration. Pontchartrain Park created a safe haven for minorities, in particular black people. Pontchartrain Park Pioneers Oral History Project exposes the wider significance both of the persons who were interviewed and the neighborhood they helped build. My team and I collected 10 video oral histories of elderly pioneers of Pontchartrain Park. Sybil Heidel Moriel, mother and widow of two black former mayors of New Orleans, Mark and Ernest Dutch Moriel, and others shared stories of their life in the early part of the 20th century and how Pontchartrain Park changed it. The freedom they gained in Pontchartrain Park may have stopped at the neighborhood boundaries, but it created a sense of pride that raised them up. The project preserves and interprets these voices for SUNO students and for the public. Through the local history of Pontchartrain Park, students will connect their larger issues in national American and African American history. They will gain greater understandings of their own lives from learning how their forebearers battled ingrained discrimination. The interviews deliver richer and fuller accounts of important historical events than textbooks because of the interview's personal nature. The voices preserved in these oral histories are rarely heard, even at an HBCU like SUNO. The interviews will open a wider dialogue between the relationship existing between pre- and early civil rights era, racial discrimination, and today. By creating a virtual teaching module of the histories, the project engages students beyond the physical classroom. For the university itself, the connection between the neighborhood and SUNO will be strengthened. The project's goal is to use the Pontchartrain Park Pioneer oral histories to explore topics of discrimination in the United States against African Americans, focusing specifically on education, employment, and housing. The project addresses effects of institutionalized lending practices, precluding African Americans from owning homes and acquiring wealth like their white counterparts. The project examines this history through the prism of Pontchartrain Park Pioneers' oral histories, exploring oral histories as historical methodology. Students will also learn how immediacy of access to otherwise unheard voices can broaden their knowledge. Students will learn history through the voices of those who created and lived it. Texts we will use will examine oral history as a methodology. We will also use texts and material examining two major disasters which impacted upon Pontchartrain Park, Hurricanes Betsy and Katrina. We will also use articles and books concerning housing discrimination and the African Americans' attempt at surmounting those discriminatory practices and patterns. During this module, we will pursue the Pontchartrain Park Oral History Project by probing the following topics: New Orleans during the Jim Crow era, issues involving housing, employment, education, and racism will be explored. We will examine how and why Pontchartrain Park was envisioned and created. We will discuss the coalition of organizations and individuals who conceived of this historic neighborhood and brought it into reality. We will probe how Pontchartrain Park's pioneers discovered the park and what they had to do in order to purchase their homes. We will discuss the unique mid-20th century gender roles that are prevalent in nearly all of the interviews that you will see. The racial dynamic of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s will be examined, especially how it is manifested in the relationships between the African Americans in Pontchartrain Park and the Caucasians in nearby Gentilly Woods. Life in Pontchartrain Park will be examined. We will see how the playground, schools, churches, and golf course impacted upon the lives of this unique neighborhood's residents. We will also explore the effect SUNO has had on the neighborhood. We will take a deeper look into the micro relationships that existed in the various blocks and on the various streets throughout Pontchartrain Park, such as Prentice, Mithra, DeBoer Drive, Providence, and Press Drive. We will discover how two hurricanes, as I stated earlier, affected Pontchartrain Park's residents, those hurricanes being Betsy and Katrina. And finally, Pontchartrain Park's contemporary challenges will be examined in order to predict the future of this historic landmark community. And so I am thrilled, I am excited, but most importantly, I am honored to be able to bring to you this discussion. Some of you might even be residents of Pontchartrain Park yourselves. And so as a result, I will be bringing to you the history of your home neighborhood. And for others, I will be bringing to you the history of the neighborhood in which you matriculate at SUNO. Again, I am excited about the opportunity and look forward to working with you to enhance and advance your knowledge. Thank you.